Hey, there we go. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Liverpool Reaction and American LFC podcast. We have, as always, my co-host, Coach Ralph, and we have a special guest from American Scousers, Timucin. Welcome to the show. How you doing,
Great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Coach? Yourself, how are you?
I am doing very well. I'm looking forward to some proper football this weekend. No more internationals.
I know. Last time during the international break, Timucin, Coach and I broke down kind of like the big run in that could make or break our season, and we have been very pleasantly surprised with the run of games against really good competition. And now we got another run of games. But before we kind of dive into those, um, we want to get to know you a little bit. So could you tell us how and when you became a Liverpool fan? What kind of attracted you to the club?
So I'm originally from Turkey. So I'm originally from Istanbul. So I grew up. My grandfather actually, well, back here, is Esat Caner, who's like one of the top players for Fenerbahce all time. Like he's always in the top tens whenever they come out with this. Actually, if you Wikipedia Fenerbahce, his photo is right on there and stuff. So grew up a Fenerbahce fan. My first memory of Liverpool is spaghetti legs. That's how I became as a little kid watching Grubauer do his thing, and I was like, "That's fun." I mean, to a kid, that was just funny and goofy. And then, that's how it kind of started. And then, back in the day, sounding like an old man, but this stuff was not on TV all the time. You didn't get a chance to watch, European football all the time. It was only top games and stuff like that. But then, I always like kind of like followed Liverpool and all that kind of stuff. Then I actually went to college in London after high school. So started in London, and my best buddy Daniel, um, who was from Liverpool, and we were like best buds, and then we kind of like bonded over Liverpool initially the first day of orientation, and then obviously when I was closer to it, I was able to follow it a lot more and stuff. Then came to the U.S. for my junior year, and we were talking about Ralph before we went on air. It was hard to connect with soccer back then in the US. We're talking 30 years ago. Holy cow, sounding older as we go here. But yeah, that was like 30 years ago. And it was harder to find it on TV. It was finding it hard to find people who were into it and stuff like that. But I followed it like as well as I could, both Fenerbahce and Liverpool. And obviously it's become a lot easier now. And I'm like really, I would say I've been fully vested in there ever since I went to college. Initially, it was kind of like a kid following from far away. And then because I think I understood more of the club itself, the club and the city and the values and stuff like that when I did go to London. As a kid, it's just dudes wearing red and playing well, right? But as you get older, and I was, I guess I was in college, once I understood the city and what it stands for, what the club stands for, it was more of like a passion then. Before it was more like admiration, I guess, from far away. It became more of a passion and like really strong following once I realized what the club was all about.
Nice. Coach, you want to share your story of your Liverpool fanhood?
Well, I suppose a key part of it was growing up in Liverpool. And I think I've told you before that, I go back even further than Timucin, both in the US and, of course, in England. So I was going to matches, and I would be whining to go home because I was so young and didn't really understand what was going on. And this, in fact, was probably in the days when Liverpool were in the second division, which is now the Championship. So yeah, I used to whine to go home. And then it changed one day very dramatically. It was after Liverpool got back into the first division when I walked into school. I was only 7 years old at the time, going into the classroom, and half of the classroom was shouting Liverpool and half the classroom was shouting Everton. And the reason was because there'd been a derby game the previous Saturday morning, or well, it wasn't Saturday morning, I guess, but I just started shouting Liverpool purely because I knew my father supported them. And I guess from that moment onwards, I was hooked. And yeah, it just took over your life after that. And Merseyside is truly a football hotbed. And I'll be back there in a few weeks' time. And yeah, trying to get a reunion together with my school friends, most of whom are Blues. So I'm looking forward to the banter, because over here the banter tends to be with Man United fans, and as we all know, their view of soccer is pretty limited. So look forward to that.
And as Coach says, he spreads the gospel of Liverpool to the U.S. I was one of his disciples. I played for him back 96 through 98, I believe. And our jerseys had the Liverpool logo, and it just kind of made sense that I just followed Liverpool, and I'm glad I did. Timucin, who are some of your favorite players of all time?
Growing up, Dalglish was the guy that I looked at and was like fun to watch, like the vision, the things he could do, and stuff like that. I think most of the younger generation are gonna like start with Gerrard. I think when you throw Dalglish and Russia's name around, you become extremely old. But probably the first guy, like I would say, and Barnes was a player that I really, really loved watching, like growing up in the early days. In the newer era, obviously it was Gerrard. Then it was like Coutinho. That I was like a huge fan of, like when I really was able to start watching regularly over here. I think that's when basically you had like a lot more access to visually watch it. Otherwise, you're seeing highlights, you're seeing games here and there and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought, like he was like a fun little dude to watch. But I mean, man, that's another thing. I think newer Liverpool fans don't understand that we went through a huge gap of misery and disappointment and frustration as you watch things. This has been like a glorious last decade. I don't know, maybe it's not as many titles as people want to see or whatever, but in terms of the football we watch, the results, and overall level the club is at, the team is at, this is not really a norm. Everybody thinks winning every week is the norm. This is not really a norm. This is like a really, really good run. Over here in the US, people would consider it like a dynasty or something like that, in terms of like the quality that we watch. But yeah, this new squad definitely has been like extremely fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm definitely a Gerrard guy myself. I mean, he was so fun. He was so good. It's just a shame that he never got the chance to win the Premier League. But I mean, he's got Istanbul, in his back pocket. So that one's really good. Coach, as far as you're concerned, some of your top players?
Well, I'm probably going to show age again here. Surprisingly, over the recent decades, I mean, Liverpool's had so many good players. I don't know that I've had a particular favourite. When I was a kid, my favourite was a little Scottish centre forward called Ian St. John, who was only 5'7", but he was incredible in the air. He just had the timing, the technique, and I once had the honour to shake his hand, actually at Goodison Park, but anyway, it was still an honour nonetheless. And then after that, I was really quite taken with Steve Highway, who of course spent many years in this country coaching down in Florida at Clearwater before he went back, and really he was the brains behind the academy once it was formed. So those would possibly be the only two players that I kind of would classify as a hero. There's just been so many quality players, and I have to agree with Timucin. I mean, like the last few years has been incredible. I've seen a lot of success for Liverpool through the years, but I think the team that won the Premier League a few years back, that is the best Liverpool team that I've ever seen. In fact, I'm having trouble, even though they're doing great right now, the pace of the game is so much slower.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to adjust from the Jurgen Klopp years to I think the current manager, Arne Slot, is clearly a manager that knows what he's doing. But it's kind of everything has gone back to it's kind of normal good soccer. I think under Jurgen Klopp, it was just on another totally different level.
Yeah, the intensity is a lot different, but hey, 9-1-1, can't complain about that, you know.
No, we're not complaining.
Timucin, iconic games that you kind of remember. Let's take Barcelona out of the equation because that's everybody's favorite, you know.
Oh man, see, like as I get older, I don't know why my memory is like. I mean, obviously Istanbul. I remember that game. I was here. I remember like I was on a podcast and they were like, "Oh, you said Istanbul. Were you there?" And I was like, "No." And I was like, "Why wasn't I there?" And I remember being sick as hell, like looking at that game, like literally in the deathbed. I thought at the time, I was feeling like that. But I was here. Of all people, my brother was at the game, who's a United fan, mind you. He was at the game, but it's always cool that because he still tells me about the halftime and how impressed he was with the fans at halftime when we were down 3-0. And, we talk about we talk about players and teams and stuff like that. I mean, you look at that Istanbul team, it's not really all that. I mean, if you look at like AC Milan at the time, it's more of like the Liverpool and City of now, where every single player was a star and probably one of the best, like 3 or 5 in their position and stuff. That's what made Istanbul, I think, that much more special. We were really big time underdogs. You look at that squad, and I mean, how many of those players like would you take into a good team, even at that time? But it was a good, solid team. That's what I mean. That game probably, I'm sure, for a lot of Liverpool fans, kind of like sticks in the head. Obviously, my very first game watching Liverpool, I still remember that 84, right? Rome. So I still remember that game. But recent memory, oh man, it feels like, I don't know. And that's what the thing about the Klopp era, right? It was so crazy, and there were so many crazy endings. It felt like so many freaking games, so many last minute goals and stuff like that. And I think it's because of that hectic pace. Like I'm really let me think of it in the background. I'll come up with like some games that really sticks in, but I mean, that Everton game, Origi goal, that's one I'm never going to forget. That game definitely sticks in mind. And honestly, obviously United games, because when you have a brother who's a United fan, those games are special. When you beat the shit out of them 5-0, 4-0, 7-0, those are good times, man. Those are good times. I went crazy. I don't know if you guys remember the game when Shaqiri came in and scored 2 goals off the bench. Both deflections, mind you, but I was going crazy then, because that's when we were kind of building something. But yeah, the recent beatings, you know how much fun it is when you have a brother and who's just like in hiding. He doesn't go online for a couple of days. Yeah, it's good times.
For me, it's the Borussia Dortmund game in the Europa League. Second leg. I mean, that game just like, I think, introduced us to the Klopp era and what's possible. Because I thought we were done and dusted, and then just out of nowhere, we were just clawed back. And what's special about Liverpool is the stadium and the fans too. That stadium just rocks. I can't wait to go visit. Coach, with your experience going to the several games at Anfield, that's probably more than several. Is there one that you went live that kind of sticks out to you?
I think the bad thing about this podcast is I'm really having to reveal my age here.
I'm here to balance things out. Don't worry.
Because Anfield is kind of renowned for its European nights. And I was there for the first big night that they ever had, which was back 1965. Liverpool had just won the FA Cup for the first time in their history. And a few days later, European and world club champions Inter Milan came to Anfield. And in that era, where there was very little football on television, and you would kind of read about all these great names, Sandro Mazzola, Facchetti, all these players, you never got to see them. And then all of a sudden, there they are live in front of you. And the atmosphere was absolute electricity that night. And this was the Bill Shankly era, the wily Scotsman. And he was a very shrewd man. And it was really electric, as I say, but he really stoked it up. Because what he did just before kickoff, Liverpool had 2 players who were injured and weren't able to play that night Jerry Byrne, and Gordon Milne. And he got them to take the FA Cup all the way around the perimeter of Anfield.
Wow.
The crowd just went through the ceiling at that point. It was just unbelievable. And it was a fantastic game. Liverpool, it's on YouTube, by the way, or the highlights are on YouTube, so you should check it out. And actually, the second goal, they do this really great move from a free kick, but Liverpool won 3-1 before losing in Italy 3-0. But this was in the era when Italian teams were not renowned, but they were known to be very friendly towards the official. With a very couple of controversial decisions, gave it to Milan. So, maybe that took a little bit of the shine off it. But just being at Anfield that night was unbelievable.
Yeah, that's those are the special. Those are like moments in time for you, especially as a fan. Like I joke around with some friends that are going to go to Anfield at some point, and we're all admitting to each other we're probably going to cry when we hear "You'll Never Walk Alone" live on that stadium. So, yeah, it's very special. But onto the current season, a great start. Timucin, Coach and I were talking before the season that we're going to have to be patient to, let this guy kind of let Slot, put his tactics in, the way he wants to play, and. Man, I mean, now I think we can change expectations a little bit because he's shown that he knows what he's doing. I know it's just I don't know, about 15 games or so sample, but so far so good. Timucin, what is sticking out to you about this team and this coach and how he's kind of just putting the puzzle pieces together?
I think it's pretty impressive that we saw almost instantly the change. And I think I was talking about this, I think it was on the Monday night show with Gally. If you've ever been in management, and I know obviously this is a different kind of management, but still in any concept, taking over, Emeram has an easier job in terms of implementing new things because people know it's in shambles and you have to make changes. So everybody in there is expecting changes because they know it was a shit show, right? Whereas when you take over something that's perceived to be good, it's a lot harder to make those changes. It's a lot harder to have people in there accept the changes. I think that's like kind of like the biggest challenge because, people are like this. When you go to any workplace and everybody is like, this is how we've always done it. And if it works, it's hard to make them do it a different way. Right. So I think him being able to kind of implement the style so smoothly has been the most impressive thing. We saw it from the preseason on. I mean, we knew it was going to take time, and we're nowhere near the project that I think he's trying to put together, which makes it even more impressive where we're at right now. Because this is not really; these were supposed to be the growing pains, right? And right. Look where we are. I think what I really like seeing is, and we all complained, I think, in summer, right? We didn't get a lot of new players and stuff like that to improve the squad. But I think in some ways that has kind of helped it. Like, he's been able to see what he's exactly have, not bed new players in, get the most out of the current ones, try to fit him into the system. I still think some are square pegs into a round hole the best way they can. Maybe edges are a bit softer so you can kind of jam it a little bit in. But I think over time we'll add more players that fits his style. I think that's been the most impressive part. He always gives the credit to Klopp in terms of having a discipline established in the team. For a new manager, that's part of the biggest challenge. So he has not had to worry about that. People come into practice on time. I mean, I'm sure coach knows that, half the battle is the discipline. You got to establish that first before you can implement other things because those are the basics. I think he's credited Klopp for this, and the maturity and the established squad who kind of maybe disciplines itself and monitors itself. So he can kind of focus on just implementing the tactics and doing some things differently and stuff like that. So him being able to sell that and have people like Van Dijk and Ali and Trent and all those guys buy into it, I think is the most impressive part of the coaching job. But it's been like from day one, we could see the style change, like Coach was alluding to earlier. We might not might not be as crazy and enjoyable to watch, but obviously very successful.
Coach, we've mentioned plenty of times, in the last, few podcasts about, we kind of miss that helter skelter excitement of it. But, transitioning to a more controlled game, what are some things that you see that are different from the Klopp era and the Slot era that aren't maybe available to like the naked eye, the casual observer?
I'm not quite sure actually, because first of all, the pacing of the game is very, very different. But yet at the same time, it seems to utilize some of Liverpool's strengths, which is the pace that they have, and then the ability to go from back to front very, very quickly. So for me, I think that what's happening is like Bill Shankly before him. The manager's been very shrewd as to how he's put the team together, realizing that they've got a lot of strengths. But I think that what he's decided to do is take down the intensity level, and the reasoning being, let's try to negotiate the season. Yeah. Think back to last season. Liverpool actually had an incredible run last season, because at one point, and it's coming into the middle of March, we're all talking about, can they win the quadruple? But yet the team was absolutely injury hit.
Yeah.
And it was clear at some point, or I think that we discussed at the time, like they've got to run out of gas. And they did. So I think one of the things that Arne Slot has done is that he's looked at what's happened before and said, right, this is a team that can challenge on multiple fronts. How can we get them through? And I think one of the things he's decided to do is pace the games very, very differently. And I think the other reason for this is because maybe he does want to tweak a few things. So he's doing it very gradually. And I think one of the things that will kind of unravel in time is once Liverpool does start to sign players. Because I'm sure he looks at this team and thinks, well, I'd like this kind of player or that kind of player. And so he's been very smart. He's got a strong squad. I think that you're correct, Timucin, in what you're saying, that he's built upon the discipline and the senior group that Jurgen Klopp has. But now I think that what we'll start to see down the road is he'll bring in one or two players which will kind of embellish the whole thing. And I think that that's the intriguing and the exciting thing going forward.
I think one thing I think we're going to find that out, right? We don't know. We're assuming in some ways that, like Coach says, this is going to hopefully pay dividends come February, March, when we always see physically tired players. And we've seen that because that pace is ridiculous. And some of the injuries, I mean, some of them are just luck, right? It's a bad tackle or whatever. But all these muscle injuries that we had over and over again, a lot of them is that wear and tear over the season of nonstop. I feel like we dictate the pace a lot more. There are times where it's very fluid and fast football, but then there are times where almost like we take a timeout within the game,
right,
and control and move it around, make the other team run around a little bit, and then kick it in again. But we control the pace. Whereas before, there was only one pace. Whether we controlled it or not, that's what we ended up playing with, and sometimes it worked against us. But more importantly, it's a lot of wear and tear on people to play, because the other team, when you play Palace or Southampton, they're only playing that game at that pace. So next week they go back to their regularly scheduled programming. Whereas with you're playing that crazy pace week in and week out. We're assuming, and I think it's more optimism maybe on our part, but I really think myself too, that come February, March, this is going to pay even more dividends, because we're going to see the same team, not a tired version of the October team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. So let's kind of go over the next 7 games. They're interesting. So at Southampton, Real Madrid in the Champions League, that's at home. Manchester City at home, at Newcastle, at Everton, at Girona, Fulham at home. So I think the first run of games that we had the advantage of being mostly at Anfield, and now it's kind of flipping a little bit. Now we're going to have to do the same thing away from Anfield. What are some predictions as far as is it going to be a very similar style? Are we going to struggle a little bit because Newcastle and Everton at home, away are tough games, especially the derby. So, Timucin, what do you think is going to happen here? How do you feel we're going to move forward, specifically in this run of games where we're away from home?
Honestly, I don't worry about the away games as much. I mean, obviously, we've been more successful away than we've been at home. And I think it's because we can kind of play more slot ball and that controlled pace. I mean, coach has been to Anfield, so I'm sure like he can say more about this too. But there are times I feel like as I watch even that, a guy like Trent and stuff gets the edging. It's almost like walking with your kid. Sometimes, like you want to go at a normal pace, but you're holding their hand and they're dragging you around. So you walk a bit more faster than you would actually want to. I kind of liken it to that, where you were playing home, and whether you like it or not, especially since people have been used to the last 8-9 years of the faster pace, the crowd is not too thrilled about the control. So the crowd pushes the team a little bit. So maybe they're moving a bit more faster than you like. Trent suddenly does this diagonal that he probably should not. You know what I mean? Like we're playing a bit faster than what slot wants. When you're away, I think it's more, you don't have that extra push. I mean, the push of the fans, the drive energy, that's nice and dandy. But in terms of the pacing of the game, I mean, you don't get that push, so you play your own game. And I really think that's why I'm not as worried now, because I think in the past, it was based on energy. So you needed the home crowd to give you that energy constantly. So we were better at home. I feel like with this control thing, since you don't constantly need that energy push, you need more of a control. The away games, I'm not as worried. I mean, you're going away in Premier League is tough wherever you go, but I'm not as worried as I was in the past, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. You're talking about the adrenaline that the crowd gives the players. Yeah, for sure. Coach, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Timucin made a lot of good points. Well, first of all, the Southampton, and I know that fans like ourselves and everybody and their dog will look at the run and say, right, this is the easy game. So I know that I always get a bit nervy about the easy game. Obviously, you've got players coming back from internationals and what have you, and you've got the South American contingent. And I understand that McAllister picked up an injury at the end of the game yesterday. So I think Arne Slot learned after the Nottingham Forest game, maybe not the best policy to play all your South Americans, although he may be forced to up front this time. I'm not quite sure. We'll have to wait and see on that score. But I think it is easier for Liverpool to control the pace away from home. And against Southampton, let's hope that they keep playing out of the back as they have been doing, because you kind of look at the thing and you think, well, the manager has been either very brave or dumb, and I'm talking about the Southampton manager now, Russell Martin. It's a bit like Vincent Kompany last year, where he has his favourite style of play. And I think that's great, but it's not getting results. I mean, I wondered whether they might fire him actually during this international break. And it's not because he's done a bad job. I mean, like, he's done a great job over his time there. But now he is playing in a realm which isn't the Championship anymore. And so do you start to go back on some of these philosophies? If I was in his shoes, I would, because at the end of the day, it's results. So will they be tempted to be more low key, park the bus a little bit? I would, but whether Russell Martin is the same, let's hope not, because if they play out the back, then I think it's Russian roulette against Liverpool, isn't it?
Well, the funny thing is, maybe he is like, hey, look at Kompany. He ended up in Bayern. Maybe if I keep going, I'll go to Barcelona.
That thing as well, but
Yeah. So the Southampton game will be interesting. You know, the park the bus kind of mentality that Nottingham kind of was really successful with. We'll see. But Nottingham Forest has much better players in my opinion. But Real Madrid, that's the boogeyman of the Champions League. I mean, and they always have our number, and I mean, that's their competition. So that game is extremely exciting. What are some of your thoughts, Timucin, on Madrid and how they're doing and how they're going to do at Anfield? Because they're going to be up for that one.
I honestly, like, funny you say that. I could not care less about that game.
Okay.
I know everybody says this Real and all that kind of, Champions League, and we have like this. Unfortunately, they have our like number over the last couple of years or whatever. But you got to look at the bigger picture. I think the biggest thing about beating Leverkusen so like well at home and getting the wins out of the first one is you can make this a rubber game. I know like making the Madrid game a rubber game is kind of like frowned upon, but you got bigger fish to fry, especially with City game coming right afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with the Southampton. I mean, you guys, me, Salim, I worry as a lifestyle. So I worry about the Southampton game. So because you talk to any Liverpool fan, they start with Madrid and City, act like the Southampton game is not even on the schedule or something like that. Those are the games I worry about the most. I don't think he will do it, but if it was up to me, I would rather, you're going to start, apart from the South Americans, probably maybe like McAllister and Diaz, probably going to start with Gakpo. You have to probably start Nunez, but I would focus on what I'm going to play, what I'm planning against City, and determine the Wednesday Madrid squad accordingly, because I think those are the important games. A draw against Madrid is like, honestly, I hate saying this, but even a loss against Madrid, I know it's at Anfield and everything, but it's not detrimental to your run. You're top, and you're going to go, and look at the rest of the fixtures that we have. You're going to get more points out of those. So whereas if you beat City, then things are getting really serious. You don't want to go against Madrid full speed and then not be able to go again full speed against City. So to me, I kind of like value the Premier League more in this next set of fixtures.
Yeah.
Because you put yourself in a situation to be able to do that by winning the early game. So eat off of your success that you had earlier. Like you built that credits, use the credits. Otherwise, it's just wasted, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, you got a point. The Manchester City's a 6-pointer, really. Like it's either 8 points or 2 points. So it's a 6-pointer. Coach, Madrid, always won the most Champions Leagues ever. They won the first 4 or 5, I think, too, when we did the deep dive on Champions Leagues. Coach, what are your thoughts on that game? And as Timucin says, like it's not as important because of the success of Liverpool in the Champions League in the previous games. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that Timucin is exactly correct. In a kind of perverse way, the Real Madrid out of the 3 games is the least important because Liverpool could afford to lose it. But I think from a manager's point of view or a coach's point of view, I think that what you have to say is, okay, we don't go as hard on Madrid and we lose, and then we lose to Manchester City. And I think you've got to keep the psychology of the squad in mind. So I think he'll go hard for the Madrid game. I think he'll go hard because I don't think he wants to let up. Because Liverpool could play well in both games and they could lose, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I think he would rather have it in his heart and his mind. Okay, we went out there, we played to win. Okay, we didn't win, but we gave it a good go rather than, okay, well, who cares? Who cares that we lost to Madrid? I think psychologically that would be bad for the team and the squad and what have you. So, but again, I agree. It is the least important of the 3 games. But I don't think the average fan will feel that way. Certainly Southampton versus Madrid. It's not really a contest in that department. So I think there's some intriguing things for the manager to have to deal with, and it revolves around the psychology of the squad.
Yeah, for sure. The Newcastle game, I'm not skipping over the Manchester City game. Just for shits and giggles. I think we all know the importance of that one. Timucin mentioned it, Coach, you mentioned it, but at Newcastle, what kind of opposition is Newcastle, and what kind of threats do they pose, Timucin?
People are talking on the panel show in terms of like teams that are kind of been hard to figure out. Like, are they good? Are they really good? Are they not that good? Like Newcastle is one of them. Brighton is another one, right? I mean, they get the results, but are they that good? They're not good. The problem with Newcastle is if it was at home, I would not worry about it as much. But away, that's a tough place to play, even if you're playing a bad Newcastle team. It's just, it's just a tough away fixture.
Yeah.
In terms of how we match up, I like how we match up against them. It's just like a Palace away always worries me, and it was a tough game this year as well. There are certain places that are just difficult to go to. There's a reason why Anfield is Anfield, and there's some others. No stadium is Anfield, but there's St. James Park is pretty darn close in terms of being a tough place to go and play at. That's probably the biggest part I worry about, and because they have some weapons up top, like with Gordon and stuff like that. I mean, we've seen him kind of like terrorize Trent in the past, which, I don't know when Trent is going to be back in action, but I kind of have more faith in this system being a bit more controlled defensively, playing a bit more safe in the back and not get us as exposed, because I think that's a team that can kind of exploit space where we don't give that much space. Whereas in the past, you kind of like threw your center backs under the bus, and then they would, have to chase down a lot of people like stretching you wide and stuff like that. But it is like when I look at those fixtures after the City game for the league, I think it's the second toughest fixture over there over the next. We were looking at it like this morning about the next 6 games, for example. Mm-hmm. I think after the City game, that's definitely the toughest fixture we have in the league.
Coach, what your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that you're correct to say or to highlight the fan base at Newcastle. It's very, very similar to Liverpool, and there's no question that the Geordies are very, very passionate about their football. And I think that from their point of view, it's possibly more important to them than it is to us, because you've had the situation where all of a sudden they have some good backing. They've been able to sign some players. Eddie Howe's done a great job. Maybe prematurely got them to Champions League level, and then obviously went down the next season. And so I do listen to a lot of radio over in the UK, and already you're starting to get some of the Newcastle fans grumbling because it hasn't been quite what they wanted and what they expected. So it's a big game for them. And I think that for Liverpool, it'll be a tough fixture. However, the Real Madrid and the Manchester City games go, and if they don't go well, then it becomes even bigger from a Liverpool point of view. So this is really quite an intense run that's coming up for the football club, and it'll be a test not just for the team but also for the manager, because again, it always comes down to it's his first season. Things have gone pretty smoothly so far. How is he going to react if things aren't going so great? So these are all things that are yet to be determined.
Yeah, that's a good point. How is he going to react in back-to-back losses or something like that? Not that I'm not trying to jinx the team or whatever, but the hardship that this league is and the runs that can go up and down. It's easy to be up and up when you're at top, but after a tough run of games and maybe some tough results, how do you react? And that's going to be what's very interesting with Coach Slot when it does happen. But so far so good. And then finally, the derby at Everton. Coach, are you going to be in England for this one?
What is the date?
Let's see. It is December 7th.
December. Oh no! It's about a week before I get over to England. So
man, that would have been fun, huh?
Well, the derby. it's always interesting when I go back to Liverpool because I either stay usually with my mother or my sister, and neither of them like football. And the game that Timucin mentioned earlier with the Origi goal, I was at my mother's, and of course we had no access to watching the game, so I was listening on the radio to that. So I've got a very vivid memory, audibly, as to how that game ended. Visually. Obviously, I've seen it many times since, but the Derby game, it's the final Derby game, certainly in the league, unless they get drawn against each other in the cup. It'll be played at Goodison Park, so there's going to be kind of a little bit of an emotional undercurrent to that game. And Everton. I do listen a lot to Radio Merseyside, so I feel sorry for Sean Dyche in that he's got a very difficult hand to play. And I think overall he's played it pretty well, but you tell that to an Everton fan. He is... They pretty much seem to want him out. And I think Dyche is very capable of setting his team up to be difficult to play against. It'll be a physical game. So Liverpool could have a few walking wounded after that game. I think that's inevitable.
Timucin, your thoughts?
I worry about that one just because of that. The last point that the coach made is more about like the injury. I mean, those games are, the Derby games are always tricky. I always find the Liverpool dynamic. I mean, even when I was in like England, like with my buddy, like his family had like Everton members. I mean, if you were maybe because of my grandfather, but if you were rooting for any team other than Fenerbahce at my household, you were not inside the building. You would be out back in the yard living in a box. But yeah, I find that dynamic always weird because it's like totally different in Turkey. Like as a Fenerbahce fan, with like Galatasaray, Beşiktaş, and stuff like that. And there's actually like a really interesting documentary on like Amazon about like these protests about it's about like a political thing, but it's about like these protests that happen in the park. But before they talk about how these different clubs got together for the protest, but before that the documentary starts with the hatred between them, so you can see like these guys would kill each other, but then they kind of unite for the protest or whatever. But anyway, going back to that thing, I just find that dynamic odd, but it makes it even trickier. I think those games become even more tricky because and not to mention Sean Dyche, who I call Sean Douche on our show, because I hate his football. I just hate his football, hate him. He's everything that's him and Neymar are everything wrong with football. But I just, that's what I worry about. It's the kind of thing that normally we find more difficult to play against. It's going to be interesting to see how slots football matches up with that. Because we know in the past it has been trickier because they don't really let their design, and that's why it's everything wrong with football. Their football is designed on not letting you play football. They're not trying to play anything themselves. Their goal is to make you not play. So in the past, I feel like sometimes we've fed into that. It's going to be interesting to see how this new regime and this new style matches up with that, because I really don't know how it's going to match up with that. More of the control and stuff like that will be easier. The tricky part is Everton getting a point out of Liverpool is almost a win for them at this point, right? Let's say
it is a win.
Yeah, they would kill for a win, 3 points, but a draw they would take as a win. Whereas it's not for us; it's 2 points lost for us. I mean, you still remember that's one of my favorite moments is Pickford laying down, winking after catching that ball, and then Ali mocking him at the end of that game. I expect a lot of that. Pickford laying around on the ground, catching like crosses and stuff like that. So that's the tricky part because they will play for a draw. I'm intrigued to see how this new setup of control ball matches up with that Sean Douche football implications.
Coach, with a team that we know what to expect. They're gonna lay back, but I like the fact that you mentioned the emotional undercurrent there. That is going to be important for them. But is that going to give them Timucin was talking about the adrenaline that Anfield gives Liverpool and maybe speeds them up a little bit. Is that going to speed Everton up a little bit? That might leave some gaps as well?
It might. It might. And I was intrigued to hear the point about the control football versus Everton, because I think Everton will kind of have a combination of sit-in, but then being very direct and physical in both the midfield and attack. And so how will Liverpool under Slot handle that? And yeah, I would have to say that I will be interested to see, because one thing's for sure, the crowd will be passionate. And if they perceive that things are going well, I mean, even something like a hard tackle, I mean, like you've seen that work for Liverpool, that really gets the crowd up and behind the team. And I think there's every possibility that that's the game that Liverpool will face on that particular day, where any tackle won, any shot on goal, even if it doesn't go in, like it's going to get the crowd aroused and behind the team. So Liverpool have to handle that and deal with it, and hopefully they will.
So we just covered 5 games. What is a successful run in these next 5 games? So at Southampton, Real Madrid at home, Manchester City at home, Newcastle away, and Everton away. Timucin, what do you think?
I already told. You can just toss up the Madrid game. Whatever happens, happens. Those 4 Premier League games, out of the 12, I think 10 is a really good run. Regardless of where that draw comes, because even if it's against City, I think 10 points out of those 4 league games is a really good run. And whatever happens against Madrid happens. That's where I'm at with that one. But I think, yeah, if you get 10 points, because especially if the win is against City, then you're in good shape. If the draw is against City, I think you're still in good shape. I mean, even this weekend, I think we're approaching a weekend where we had 2 ridiculous weekends in a row, right? Where everybody lost points. It was just like win, 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 win for Liverpool. Very possible we get a weekend like that if you take care of business at Southampton. Arsenal play at home to Forest, and City is playing Spurs, which I don't think is a good matchup for them based on how Spurs play. So either City will smash them 5-1, or that'll be like a 3-3 draw or something like that. So I think if we get 10 points out of that, I really feel we extend the leads we have in terms of points.
Coach?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if Liverpool doesn't lose any of the games, I think that would be really good. I think some interesting points there, and it revolves around not just on what Liverpool does, but on what some of the other teams do. So I'm seeing all these podcasts and everything, that Liverpool's going to win the league. I mean, all of a sudden it's flipped. It's flipped because I felt that they were getting underestimated, if anything. And now all of a sudden, and some are almost talking like, oh yeah, like they'll definitely win the league. And I don't see that in the Manchester City era that you can really say that. And so you kind of look at this weekend and just say hypothetically, Liverpool goes to Southampton and wins, and then Manchester City don't get a result against Tottenham, which is a tricky game. And yes, I agree, like they could go out and win 5-1 because Tottenham leaves themselves very open at the back, but also Manchester City could get overrun.
Yep.
I mean, Tottenham is just that kind of a team. I mean, but just say that they don't get a result. That means that Manchester City could be going to Anfield next week, 8 points behind Liverpool, like if that scenario occurs. And that puts an incredible amount of pressure on them.
Mm-hmm.
And if Liverpool gets a result, then all of a sudden, Liverpool would be really clear. Am I counting?
Already getting giddy thinking about it.
If you were to say to me, who do I think will win the league this year? I've got to follow the sheep and say Manchester City, even though they're 5 points behind. But if that scenario was to happen and they're 11 points behind, then you've got to say, wow, this is a different ball game again. So I think that you look at Liverpool's run, you know, I think Klopp has really, sorry, not Klopp, Slot. That was a slip. Slot has been really taking it one game at a time, which is probably the best way to do it. And if they get to the end of the Manchester City game and everything's gone well, then who knows what happens? But a lot depends on what the other teams are doing.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, Timucin, I want to thank you for joining us. If you want to plug American Scousers real quick.
Yes, you can see more of Salim at American Scouser. Yeah, I mean, AmericanScouser.com is the website. So we do have a lot of writers that we constantly put like written content on. I know a lot of people don't read anymore, so we also have the YouTube channel. So we have obviously social media, but on YouTube we're under American Scouser. We do a lot of shows. Actually, I do a morning show. Obviously, we have a Monday night podcast, Thursday night podcast, and more. What I'm really starting to enjoy is we have a lot more Premier League content now. We have a Premier League show, but we also have a Premier League panel show. It's always interesting to get perspectives from a Brentford fan or like a, so we have like 4 or 5 of us, Arsenal and stuff like that, United in there, talking about the Premier League. So a lot of like Premier League content as well. So I hope people do go over there and give us some support, give us a like, follow, check out a couple of the shows, because I'm hoping you will enjoy it and you will get to see a lot more of Salim. So it's a win-win-win.
Well, Timucin's the boss of that one, and 977 subscribers, right? So right around the corner from 1,000, which is a goal by Christmas, if I remember right. So
that's the goal.
Please go ahead and subscribe to American Scousers. They really do a good job with all the different shows and different perspectives. Coach, as always, thank you so much for your perspective, and everybody, thank you for joining us, and take care. See you next time.
Thank you.